thank you very much for taking the time to get on here and just tell us a little bit of what's going on. I know you're a busy guy. How we found out about you really is our team, Michael, watches a lot of Naked and Afraid, and he happened to catch a point on there, I guess, where you happened to briefly mention about
Yeah.
a Bigfoot encounter. So we've got a very special guest here tonight, and one of the team members, Michael. He's a big fan of the, I believe it's Discovery Network. Is that right, Trent?
Correct. Discovery.
And Naked and Afraid, and he was listening to an episode, and he said, "Lance, this guy actually had." He talked about a brief encounter, and I think I'd like to get a hold of him if we could. So he messaged, did Facebook Messenger, and got a hold of Trent here. And so, welcome. We appreciate you coming on, doing an interview here with the Cryptid Brothers. And so,
Yeah. Thank you. Glad to be here.
if you would like to just kind of jump in, Trent, we appreciate your time. And just, I saw briefly the encounter you had in the tent, but feel free to start anywhere you would like on anything, kind of where you grew up and what your thoughts are or encounters that you've had while you were growing up. I believe it's in Utah.
Yeah. Correct. Utah, northern Utah, North Ogden to be exact. And if you Google North Ogden Bigfoot, some of these experiences that I'm going to share with you, you'll find them all online. We was back in the 80s. I was 10, 12 years old, and it was kind of a small community. There is not one person in that community that did not see or believe in Bigfoot. There was about a month period where there were sightings every night. And the cool thing about it was you'd see the reports in the newspaper, you'd hear the reports. It was people you knew. It wasn't just some name that you didn't know, and here was a story. It was, oh my gosh, that guy's on the city council. That guy's the mayor. This guy's a bishop of a church.
Wow.
Everybody knew everybody. And so that made it a little bit more credible of, wow, something really strange is going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
Yeah, that's kind of the background where I grew up. Jumping forward a little bit, I was contacted by Discovery to do their show Naked and Afraid. And I love survival. I grew up in the mountains. We lived on the mountainside, and I'll share the story, kind of what happened with me.
Sure.
But they got wind of Bigfoot something, and they immediately flew me down to L.A. The producers gathered around in a room. They're like, tell us everything. We want to know all this Bigfoot stuff. And so I told them, and it was funny because when they preliminary interviewed me, the gal on the phone, she says, tell me about Bigfoot. And I gave her a 30-second commercial, and she goes, okay, wait, my call's only supposed to be so long. I'm putting that on hold. I want to hear everything. So it kind of blew up from there. I went out. I was in Belize for 21 days on the show. They shared some of the experience. I gave them everything, but they just shared little excerpts of what I said.
Okay.
But,
Interesting.
so a lot of people have a lot of questions, and I'm sure this guy that contacted you, your associate, he watched the show. He heard some of these excerpts that Discovery showed. I'm out there 21 days. They condense it to a 42-minute movie or TV show. And
Wow.
obviously it piques interest because they leave you hanging on everything I say.
Oh, sure. There is a high intrigue. It seems like it's not even peaked yet on this whole Bigfoot cryptid phenomena going on right now. And my brothers and I, we talk about it literally every day. And not just interviews, but
Sure.
it's, I don't know what you think on that perspective. I don't want to derail here your encounter here, but I just think it's just seems like it's on an up ramp with all of this.
And I totally agree. I mean, with everybody having a cell phone in their pocket nowadays, I'm telling you right now, it's only a matter of time before something really great comes out. Because, back in the day, you had a 32 millimeter camera, you try to take a picture. If you had it with you, go to develop it. Hopefully it exposes right. But
Yeah.
times have changed. It's getting better.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I have a cabin up in the mountains, and I have a big flagpole and I wave a Bigfoot flag. And I had a guy stop by the other day, and he's like, I know a guy on the other side of the ridge that has pictures. Him and his son were hunting, and they took pictures. He wants to meet you. So it's kind of fun because it's just getting better and better with the technology.
It really is. And I think what astounds me, I'm always in awe of technology. What astounds me is that we literally got this podcast show started for $40. And
Nice.
I had a broken cell phone, the volume, so I started, anybody can start it for free on YouTube. And we did kind of our own artwork, and I got a Bluetooth speaker because my phone was broke, and went off to the races. My first interview was my brother, who had a counter where we lived in Oklahoma. So it is incredible technology and these podcast shows that are popping up all over the place. And I think it's just on the uphill of the bell curve.
Right.
It's really cool.
I
It's
totally
exciting.
agree.
It's exhilarating. It's frightening. And there's one thing we found out is that there are a lot of people that's had some terrifying encounters to the point where they're still suffering some PTSD from this. And
Yeah.
it's just, they don't call them Bigfoot in many cases. They call them monsters. And
Yeah, well, and I appreciate hearing that because I bump into so many people that have had experiences, and I'm telling you, if there's anything that I know, it's that we don't know everything.
yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
think about it. Earthworms, they have proven, cannot see sunlight. They have no clue sunlight exists. Does that mean it's not there?
Hmm.
What we think we're so superior as humans. What do we not know? I think there's things out there we have no clue just because we're limited.
Well, I think you're
So,
right. You're absolutely right. There's an interesting psychologist, Dr. David Buss. He's like a world-renowned. Everybody knows he's written all these books, and he's written all these biases that the human mind goes through. And one of them is called a certainty bias. And it's kind of he said the certainty bias says the way the mind thinks is that we're so certain we're high on our own ego. We don't listen to really the truth, and if the truth is in front of us, we still don't believe the truth, and we just are very limited
amen.
in what we're backed into a corner of what we think we know, and outside of that, it's just we're done. I'm certain that you're wrong.
Yeah, amen. I totally agree. It was funny. We were camping last year with my girlfriend, and she's sitting in the chair at the campsite, and she goes, "Oh my gosh, look at those clouds. Do you see those colors?" And I look up, and I'm like, "Yeah, great, awesome." She's like, "No, do you see those colors?" I'm like, "Really? You're getting that excited about gray?" And then her realization came. She goes, "Dude," she took off her sunglasses, said, "Put these on." I put on the sunglasses, totally different sky.
Hmm. Excellent
Seriously,
point. Excellent
all I
point.
know is there's a lot we don't know.
Absolutely. I
So,
couldn't agree more. That is what we've been trying to tell people. If and in the same respect, I think that though I don't know if you would agree on this, Trent, but if people knew what was truly out there, they would never leave their home. I mean,
I I would agree with that.
they probably would never go hiking, kayaking, hunting. Um, they would just go, no way. If those things are out there, no way. I'm
Sure, I totally agree. I mean, and speaking of that, my encounter was in my yard at my house. It was pretty cool. And let me share a couple of stories with you. It's
sure.
let me kind of build up to my experience because again, we were in a tight knit neighborhood for about 3-4 weeks. Every night, somebody had a new story. Something else came out. And I grew up, and let me just set the premise. I grew up in the mountains. Our home was on the side of a mountain. When I was a small child, 8, 10 years old, my brother and we would hike up the mountain. We'd take guns. We'd sleep overnight. So it's not like I grew up in the city where I'd shut the door and be afraid of the dark. We without parents, without adults, are camping in the woods. I mean, there were nights we're in the tent and we can hear a cougar outside the tent. And we just All right, the gun's loaded. If it tries to come in, we'll shoot it. I mean, it was no big deal. so,
Right.
so
Yeah.
my experience freaked me out. And for a kid that grew up like that, to be a little bit nervous, it's got to be a bigger deal than a bear or a cougar or some animal. I mean, and it's to the point where when you're outside so much, you know if something's walking on four legs past your tent or two legs or whatever, the sniffing, the grunts, the growls, you start to pick up on, oh, that's that. And it's fun, too, because my parents were old school parents where they said, you know what, you need a journal, document your life. I mean, this is back when there's no internet, no cell phones, no anything when I grew up. And so I went back through my archives of books, and I found my childhood journal where I wrote about it the next morning. And it's pretty cool to now, 40 years later, look at that and read that, and it actually brings back a lot of the emotion of what happened when it happened. So
That's cool. That's
with that
really
said,
cool.
let me just share a couple of stories that were in the area. There was a neighborhood, so if you can picture in your mind a neighborhood, and then about 2 miles outside of that neighborhood, on the side of the mountain, was where I lived in my house. I didn't have a lot of neighbors. I had one directly across the street and then one directly north. And those were my only neighbors. So there was us and two other neighbors. And then up the road about a quarter mile, there was another house. And then it started to get more and more until the neighborhood built to kind of just set the premise. Straight below our house, about 2 miles, there was a trout farm. And if you've ever been to a trout farm, they're big. The one where, and it's still there and it runs today. It's the North Ogden Trout Farm. There's big cement tanks, and they stock it with fish. So you can bring your family, drop a pole in, pull a fish out, take it home and eat it. Well, the family that owned it, the Barkers, their account, I'll just share their account with us. Kent Barker, I think it was Kent, anyway, came in one morning, was walking into the farm, and the first pond, he sees a couple of fish up on the bank. He's like, that's weird. And he looks at them, and they have bites out of them like you would see in an apple. And he walks a little further where the big main pond is, and there's a couple more fish up on the bank. And again, one's broken in half. There's a bite mark out of one. But the tanks are about 12 feet deep. And you can literally see where something walked across that tank, the footprints on the moss in the bottom that go across the tank and then up into the trees in the background. And right in front of that pond, it's the big pond where the big fish are. So everybody fishes there, so it's dirt. The grass is worn away. But there's a footprint perfectly in that right there as it steps down into the pond. Now, they called Utah Fish and Game. Fish and Game came out. They investigated. They took a plaster cast. That cast immediately went up to Weber State University, the local college, to where they analyzed everything about it, went back to the Fish and Game, and the Barkers, who still own the trout farm that runs today, the Fish and Game, after they were done with all their investigations, gave them the plaster cast, and they retain it even today. So that was their story, and that was about a mile below our house.
Oh, wow.
Just due east below our house. Another story is one of my good friends. He was playing basketball down at the local church, which my house on the mountain, you go due east about a mile and a half, there's a trout farm. Another mile is the church. And he's playing basketball at the church. He's done. He's riding his bicycle home. It's easier to cut up through the trout farm to get to the big neighborhood than it is to ride all the way around town. And this is his story. This is how he told it to me. He says, I'm riding my bike, and I get to the trout farm, and it's trails up through the trees, so I get off my bike, and I have to push it because you can't ride a bike through there. And he says, do you ever get that feeling that someone's watching you? but there's nobody around. I'm like, yeah, I've had that feeling. He said, oh my gosh, I have never had that feeling so strong. He said it kind of freaked me out. And I'm telling you right now, Lance, I'm getting goosebumps even telling the stories because it's so amazing. But he's walking up through the trail and he says, I have this feeling that I am being watched. He says, I stop, I look around, I don't see anything. And this is it's dusk. It's kind of that time of night where, should I turn the headlights on my car or not? Kind of that time of night.
Mm.
So he starts pushing his bike up a little bit more through the trees. He goes, I had the strangest feeling. And I stop, and I'm looking. He says, and about 10 feet away in the trees, he goes, I start looking at this tree that was different shape than all the other trees, and all of a sudden it moved and took a step towards me.
Oh, no.
He said it was about 9 feet tall, covered in hair. That's all I remember. He drops his bike and just runs like 3 miles to his house. He gets to his home, and at this time, he was 13 years old. He is sobbing, like crying, and his parents can't calm him down. And it was about 2 hours later, they called my dad and said, come over and help calm our son down because he knows your family well, he knows you well, we don't know what to do. My dad goes over, and it was about 2.5 hours before he calms down, couldn't even tell anybody what happened. Dropped his bike on the trail, just left it, and just ran home. And he says, the story, and I'm looking at it, and it steps out. And he said, honestly, 10 feet away, not very far.
Oh, my gosh, that close.
So that was another story.
Wow, that was
but,
close.
But there were stories, there were stories like this every single day. Now, my experience, let me share you with what happened to me. I have a little bit unique experience. Anyway, as I tell the story, you'll find out what happened. We, again, like I said, we're outdoor kids. This is summer vacation. We're not in school. It's over the summer months. We sleep, I am third of 4 boys. So all us boys grew up hunting, fishing, in the mountains, shooting guns, whatever. During the summer, we sleep outside every single night. In sleeping bags, on the tramp, in tents, whatever. So my dad has a camper he just bought. We're all out in the camper on the side of the house. And my dad raised us to love the mountains and outdoors. The man fears nothing. He comes out one night, knocks on the camper door, opens it up, says, boys, kind of want you to come in the house tonight. We're like, what? He says, let me show you this. Pulls out the newspaper. Says, here's an article published in the local newspaper. And he read it, and it was sightings of a Bigfoot, a large, hairy creature, on and on and on. It was a whole article in the local newspaper. And we're like, are you serious? That's so stupid. We're like, Dad, if you believe in that, you got issues. And I remember his words perfectly. He says, kids, I don't care if it's a Bigfoot or not. In fact, I hope it's a Bigfoot. But what scares me more is that it's not. And I don't want my kids out here with someone running around the neighborhood like that. And we were like, all right, we'll come inside, sleep in our beds. So we go in, and it was 3-4 days later. We're like, Dad, we're not sleeping in the house anymore. This is stupid. He's like, all right, go for it. You can sleep outside again. And we set up some tents on the side of the yard. And my oldest brother and youngest brother were in a big 7-man tent. And then myself and my brother that was 2 years older were in one of those little tiny, old school, little triangle tents where you both lay down, you barely fit.
Oh, yeah.
We were in that little tent. And it was probably about 10:30 at night. We got the flashlight on. We're playing cards. Our brother's in the other tent. They're dead asleep. And we're just, out there having a good time. And we hear something in the yard. So we kind of just shut up for a minute and we listen. and we hear something walking around the tents. And again, we grew up in the mountains. We're in the mountains. We're like, that thing's on 2 feet.
Mm.
Nobody should be at our house. If that's mom or dad, they're going to talk to us.
Right.
And honestly, Lance, my first thought as a little kid was, it's a murderer. Murderers do this.
Mm-hmm.
As a little kid, your brain starts going, because nobody should be there. We're outside of the neighborhood. If somebody's in our yard, it's someone that should not be there.
Right, exactly.
We click the flashlight off. We throw the cards to our feet. And if you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and you heard a sound, and every sense in your being is alert, that's how it was.
Mm.
And we're sitting there, and we're listening to this thing walk around the yard. And we're just like, what is going on? My brother's like, we're whispering, and he's like, I'm not going out there to see what it is. So we lay down, and we're just like dead still, listening. Because we're like, if something is out here, it shouldn't be out here. We've had elk, we've had bear, we've had cougars. We know what that's all about. Something is walking around, and the funny thing was, it was sniffing. You could hear it, that like a dog would,
Wow.
which was really strange.
Interesting.
And so we're just listening, and it's walking around. And then we hear on the back of the yard as if someone were to take 2x4s and take them up over their head and throw them into a pile. It sounded like 2x4s being thrown. And we were just like, and I remember I leaned over to my brother and I go, it's just the neighbor stacking wood. Because our neighbor was totally green, and he had solar panels on his entire roof. And my brother said back to me, he would never own wood. And we're just like, what the heck? And we could hear boards being stacked as if you were throwing 2x4s on one another. And then we hear it come back. And we smell musty, kind of like swamp donkey smell. Something just gross. And about that time, my mom is in the my dad is out of town, mind you, this weekend. My dad's on business out of town. My little sister loves sleeping in tents. She hates going out in the dark. So she asked my mom, let me fall asleep and just carry me out. So meanwhile, in the house, the movie gets over. I think my mom was watching MASH or something like that. And the next day, talking to my mother, she said, my show ended. I knew it was time to take your sister out. She said, but a feeling overcame me. Not don't go out there, but just I'm afraid. She says, I've never in my life been afraid, ever. But not wanting to deal with the wrath of my little sister the next morning if she slept in the house, she says, I packed her up, went to the front door, and we're on the north side of the house. My mom says she flips on the light switches, which are floodlights on the north side. So boom, lights up the whole yard. I am on the dark side of the tent.
Okay.
And my brother's big tent was closer to the house. The minute those lights came on, and we're both laying in that little triangle tent, something lays down on the tent, fully covers my left arm and left leg, and I literally have to pull out of under it. Something ducked to hide from the light. And I missionary styled my brother. The whole side of the tent collapsed in.
What?
Now my
Wow.
brain, I'm going, dude, if that's a person, there is no way on this planet they're going to disrupt a little kid in a tent that's going to scream.
Right.
If it's an animal, they're going to stare at that light and not move, or they're going to bolt into the trees. It laid on the tent on me. Totally half my body was covered. Pulled out of under it, rolled over, face to face with my brother. He is wide-eyed, and he is like not talking because he sees what just happened. Whoa. Meanwhile, my mom comes out of the house, gets to the first big tent, which is about 15 feet closer to the house. Again, the next day, talking to her, she says, by the time I got to the tent, I was so nervous. She says, I literally zipped up the tent, threw your little sister in, didn't even look where she landed, zipped it down, ran to the house and locked the door. and
Wow.
the next day I'm thinking, well, thanks, Mom. So we escape the clutches of the beast and make it to the porch and can't get in because you locked the door.
Oh, my God.
And she's like, I was freaked out. I didn't know what to do.
Interesting.
So she goes back in the house, flips off the floodlights. It was literally 2-3 minutes later, pitch black. The tent, poof, pops back up. It's gone. Never hear from it. Can't hear anything the rest of the night. We're not about to get out of the tent because every scenario is going through our heads.
Wow.
We are up for hours. Finally, I think 5, 6 in the morning, we fall asleep for a half hour. We wake up, sun comes up. We zip up the tent very slowly. We peek out, and in our backyard, now we had a wood-burning stove to heat the house. There are logs bigger round than us kids thrown all over the backyard, everywhere. Us kids can't even lift them. They're so big. What we think happened is we had kittens that lived in the wood pile because we would go logging. My dad would stack them. We'd chop them later. We thinking he was throwing the logs to get to the kittens all over the backyard. That's clearly the wood we heard smacking each other that sounded like 2x4s.
Wow.
Just tossing these logs 10, 15, 20 feet from the wood pile. And we're like, oh, that's weird. We have rabbits up in our pasture up on the hill, and we're like, hey, let's go feed the rabbits. We get up to the rabbit cages, and they're on 4-foot stilts, wood frame, chicken wire, with the little latches, with the hook that goes in the circle to open and close each door.
Mm-hmm.
Every rabbit's gone. There's blood in every cage.
Oh, man.
And all the cages are locked up perfectly as and we checked it. There's no way a varmint could get in there, get the rabbits. Everything was sealed. Something unlatched them, took them out, latched it back up. We found one of the rabbits about 20 feet away, and it wasn't eaten. Like, if an animal finds an animal and it eats it,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell it's eaten. This animal was not eaten. All the meat, all the fur, everything was still there. But it looked like it was pulled apart. Just pulled. Just ripped apart.
Wow.
So, that was our experience. Our neighbors that are always scoping the mountain came to us and told us they saw a Bigfoot right above our house that night. They said, we're always scoping the mountain for deer. They're all hunters. They saw a Bigfoot. They ran in the house, pulled out their big scopes. They saw something. They said it looked like a bear. They pulled out their big scopes. They said, oh my gosh, this thing's on 2 feet. So they went trucking up after it. They got within about 20 yards of it twice.
Wow.
And they said it was 9, 10 feet tall, dark hair. But they said what we noticed was on the back, right between the shoulder blades, there was a lighter color of fur in kind of a circular motion area. But they said we're within 20 yards of it, went up over another ridge within 20 yards of it, watching it the whole time, and then they said it just took off. It went down a canyon and was gone. So that's what happened to me. I never saw it per se, but the neighbors said they saw it in our yard. Amazing stories, one after the other. And another one was our neighbors that lived directly across the street. They had just moved from Idaho, the potato state, where they had acreage where they farmed potatoes. So every year they'd go up and farm it, bring back all the neighbors a 100-pound sack of potatoes. Well, it was a couple days after this, Ray Reese, he says to my dad, oh, I see you got your potatoes. My dad's like, yeah, no, We never got those. You told me you put them by the barn. I went down there. They weren't there. He's like, what? I even had your name across the sack, Nielsen. He's like, really? Because they're gone. My dad's like, no. I went down there because you said they were there. They weren't there. Well, it was about 2 weeks later with my scout troop. We went on a hike up Coldwater Canyon. We're about 7 miles up. Guess what we find? Off the trail, there's a sack of potatoes. There's potatoes spewed all around with bite marks, like apples, with the name Nielsen on them. About 7 miles up the canyon, 100-pound sack of potatoes off the trail.
Wow.
I'm not really sure what kind of animal would do that.
Well, there's only two that I'm aware of. Number one, to take bites like that. I mean, a bear could, but it would be very difficult to do that. You could see easily. You'd have to have an opposing thumb to really, without a bunch of claw marks on it, scratch marks, to just take the bite, kind of hold it like an apple and do that. So that's very interesting. What I find interesting too is that your mom had this gut feeling that she's never had before, that she explained to you was happening, what was happening at that moment with you and your brother, and she was feeling it, and you both didn't know, what was, there was nothing said. And when you explained this, I'm sure you obviously shared it with your mom. She was like, well, this is what I felt. So that just kind of in many ways corroborates, wow, she could sense something was up.
Yeah. And we were kids. We were in the middle of it. I can tell you right now, we wanted nothing more than to get out of that tent, but we were not leaving that tent.
Yeah.
Just some little tiny nylon fabric. Can't even imagine how good that feels to have that between you and something else.
Oh yeah. My God. So you were on top of your brother. How heavy was this creature on you?
It was when it laid down, it was a gut reaction, just an instinct. The minute it touched me, I started pulling away from it. But it was so fast, it covered my entire arm and part of my left leg. And I remember I pulled my arm out first to get my face away from it, and my leg was covered by then, and I just pulled it out of under it and flipped over onto my brother. And we just laid there staring each other in the face. I mean, it's pitch black, so,
right.
You can feel mine. And the whole side of the tent is collapsed. And I'm sitting there going in my head, there is something right next to us that is bigger and badder than me.
Yeah.
I'm a little kid. And this isn't just a little kid imagination. Something laid on that tent to hide from the light. Again, if it's a person, I don't even care if you're a crazy person. You're not that stupid to lay on a kid in a tent to hide.
Right. The human being would want to not get that. Not lay on a tent. You would hide behind it.
Right? You'd duck. You'd crouch.
That's right.
You wouldn't lay on it, especially when you lay on it and you feel it move under you, away from you. If it's an animal, what? And animals don't hide from light. They either look at it or run from it.
That's right.
Yeah, that right there, just laying there with my brother, watching this transpire, and everything was like in my brain in slow motion. And I'm like, because the whole time before, we're thinking, dude, somebody escaped from the prison and they're walking around our yard.
Right.
That was going through my head. But the minute that did that, my brain went, no, I don't care if you've been committed to the loony bin. You're not that dumb. Even though people are crazy, they still have some type of instinct.
Well, right. I don't think it's, I'm not going to say I'm an expert when it comes for humans hiding, like what the natural physiology is, but I'm going to say it's not naturally normal to lay on A human being to lay on a tent, you want to get away from, obviously, a tent. There's probably someone in there. I'm not even
Right.
going to touch it.
Granted, we're in the mountains, so okay, let's say it's an animal. Ain't never heard a story of an animal doing that.
No, no. Bears don't do that. Bears don't do that.
Uh-uh.
Hogs don't do that. Deer don't do that.
And this tent is at least 6 feet long. I mean, I'm probably only 4'5" at that point, but it collapsed the entire side of the tent. It just laid on it to hide. It didn't crouch. It didn't step on it. It laid across the tent. And the neighbors scoping it in our yard.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
So lot of strange things happening. I mean, I know dozens of people that said, I saw it. You can't take that away from me. You can say whatever you want. So when I tell my story, I don't tell people you need to believe this. I just say, you know what? I'm going to tell my story. You think whatever you want. I totally get it. We don't have conclusive anything of anything. But what I do know is us humans are arrogant and we think we know everything. But I'm pretty sure we don't.
I'm with you. My brothers are with you. We say this all the time. And I just kind of laugh a little bit because there's a huge assumption what I'm getting ready to say. When I see people on television and on radio and on YouTube and people talk about it that's never really had an experience, it makes to reason when they say, well, how come no bones have been found and this and that? And I'm saying, well, here's the thing. As far as you're aware of, there hasn't been. I think there has, but good luck on trying to get that information. But here's the thing. They're assuming and relating everything else to the indigenous wildlife out there that is rightly
Exactly.
smart. There's some smart animals out there. We know that they're very alert. They're very keen. Deer, caribou, elk, bear. I mean, they have to have instincts of survival. But when you're talking a
Right.
creature like this being, this relic hominoid being, it's a whole nother level. They're not dumb. They have had to react to survive. They don't have manners like you or I. They react quickly to either hunt, to survive, to protect, to run, and they're going to do instinctively, and I believe they have been taught by their parent being. I believe that there is a learning that they are taught as when they're young, how to evade humans, how to stay hid in plain sight. I believe when it comes to being wood savvy, I think we can't hold a stick to them at all. I really do. I'm not saying that they're smarter than us. I'm just saying when it comes to the woods, to be able to stand in an area and be so well hidden and motionless that we could walk right by them and never know it. So,
Well, let me put a little twist on that. I was speaking to a lady. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say this. It's gonna make me sound nuts.
no,
I was speaking to a woman
mm-hmm.
who said she encountered a Bigfoot. She said she believes, again, this is, okay, my stories are my stories. This story is from some lady that told me this. But if you listen to the general aspect, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it is real. I'm just saying, maybe there's a possibility. She said she encountered a group of Bigfoots. Her theology was they're telepathic. They know when you're coming. They know how to avoid you. They know not to be seen. It's kind of like a cougar. You talk to anyone that hunts cougar out there. You will not find a cougar unless it wants to find you, unless it wants you to see it, unless you have dogs and you flush it out. She said they're telepathic. So I'm thinking, okay, I can roll with that because I know there's things we don't know.
Absolutely.
Now, about 5 years ago, just up the road, about an hour and a half, I worked in Roosevelt, Utah. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but Skinwalker Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
It's right up the road from me.
Yep, I have. Matter of fact, my brother and I were just having this conversation today on Skinwalker Ranch.
Dude, seriously, about 3-4 years ago, they produced a movie about Skinwalker Ranch. I was working in Roosevelt. I talked to the people that are on Skinwalker Ranch, and they're coming out with a movie. The government shut it down. They said, nope, you're not doing it. But they threw it on the internet, so there were a couple of sites that picked it up. It was rolling out movie theaters nationwide. Government shut it down. You're not showing this. Being that I have kids, and they're way more technology smart than me, one of my kids hacked into something and downloaded it. We watched it. Okay, Skinwalker Ranch. A skinwalker, by definition, is a shapeshifter.
Mm-hmm.
Something that can be something and be something else. Again, the earthworm doesn't know the sun is there. There's things we have no clue about.
I agree.
But the premise is the gentleman that owned the ranch, there was a lot of paranormal activity. He watched his son be taken. He called everybody, said, come help. The feds came out. They deemed him crazy. He left the ranch. It's a big Indian nation up there. They said, you guys want it? To the local Indian tribals. They said, yeah, no, we're not touching that place. We don't want it. We do not want that land. So the government took access of it. So I'm working up there, and I have a guy come into my store, and we have to ID people, and he hands me his military ID. I'm like, do you have a driver's license? He's like, no, can't give you any ID other than this. I'm like, come into my office. So I'm talking to him, because our company policy is you have to have legit ID.
Mm-hmm.
Well, legit like driver's license ID.
Right.
That's what we did. He says, no, this is all I can give you. So he proceeds to tell me, he says, there's certain things I can tell you, certain things I can't. But I am retired Black Ops, I'm military. I run security at the Skinwalker. I'm like, wow, really? Okay, I've started to hear about this. He says, I have been doing patrols. I've been there 3 months. He says, and we're all hardcore military. I've been there longer than anyone in the last 15 years because they just can't handle it up there.
Whoa.
He says there are things that are so unexplained that it blows my mind. He says we do rounds every night. We have full night vision, and our orders are shoot anything that moves. Anything. He says we bring dogs in once a week because the dogs can sense something weird going on in an area, and then we bring everything in, and every time the dogs sense it, there's something paranormal going on. So, I'm thinking of this, and I'm like, well, no wonder this Bigfoot can be so elusive. Maybe he does sense things we don't. Maybe it does have abilities we can't comprehend. No wonder we haven't seen it.
Right. I agree.
Or we've seen it, but no wonder we don't. No wonder we can't get a good picture or a video of it, because it can control what happens and what doesn't, because it knows what's going on.
I agree. We've been investigating for now a number of years just a little bit prior to creating this show. Part of what we do is just more than behind the mic. We actually go into the field and we interview, we investigate, we stay the night. We try to draw in things to us and we film it. But
Right.
here's what we've learned. It's very interesting, and you've touched on very well here, is that what we do know is that everybody that was creating these shows and they want something to step out in front of them, if you're holding a camera in your hand and you're trying to capture something walking in front of you, it's not going to happen. I think that camera, they may
Right.
not know it's a Sony HD camera versus a gun, but you're holding it in front, and they just it won't there won't you won't get any encounter. If you do, it's very much happenstance. We do know that. And the other thing is, what we've learned, and many other people, is that it's a lot of luck to get anything on a game camera. We believe that they can see an infrared, and they can either, and again, you've touched on it very well here, they can either hear the electronics in the game camera, they can smell the game camera because it's still being gassed off because most of them are housed in a plastic case, or they can see the infrared or a combination of all of it. And so
Right.
this is what I tell people. If you want to try to use a game camera, you're going to have to get an expensive game cam that does not emit infrared. You're going to have night vision that gathers light instead of emitting it. The second thing is
Right.
you don't put it at a 4 foot level. You're going to have to put it up high in the tree and angle it down at about a 45-degree angle.
Or put it in the raccoon hole.
Yes,
Right.
something like that. You can't use the old black strap that comes with it. You're going to have to get creative where, if I can see it, I guarantee you they can see it. Um, so you're going to have to do something like that where it, it it's out of sight. You can't have it at the 4 foot level. These are smart creatures. So we kind of go with that mindset that they can see the infrared, they can smell it, or they can hear the electronics. And, you know, I think that when you're born out in the woods, your senses are alert, super sensitive. Your smells, your olfactory, your vision, your tactile touch. So why, back on what you just said, why wouldn't it be reasonable to say, can they hear better than us? I bet you they can. Can they see better than us? I absolutely agree that they can. Everything is heightened when you're in the woods and you live there. You can. That's part of survival. It's built in their DNA because they have to have all their senses heightened to stay alive, to survive, to evade.
Right. And that's all logical because we're man and woman, and that's how our logical brains think. Like when I was in Africa for 40 days with Taken and Afraid, they gave me a bow and an arrow. I hunt all over northern Utah. When you see a herd of deer, you see or the elk, and you know their patterns, you can send a person over to walk and push them and blah 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 and get an animal. Not in Africa. Those animals are so skittish. They have such bigger and badder predators than we have out here. Their senses are so much more heightened than I have ever seen in my life. It's just insane.
That makes sense.
And so I'm like watching that, and I'm thinking these animals in Utah and North America have nothing on African animals because there's lions and hyenas, and they're so much more heightened. And then coupled with the worm story, they don't know there's light. They don't know there's sun. What if there's animals out there that can see and sense things we have no clue of because we're human and we're limited?
Mm-hmm.
They have abilities that we can't even comprehend because we don't have them.
I agree.
So if a worm could talk and say, there's no sun, we'd be like, you're an idiot. There is too a sun. It shines every morning. It heats up my lawn, so I have to water it. And they're like, no, I live under your lawn. Fine.
No, I love that analogy. I mean, you're hitting on points that we talk about all the time, and I think it's very interesting in talking about your encounter that how it laid down is that we've actually had an experience where my brother and I popped out of a tent after about the second night in a row, and the third or fourth time that second night, our tarp was lifted on our tent, and there was no wind. It was dead
Wow.
silent. And the tarp was one of those crackly, $3 tents you get at Arbor Freight. I mean, it was just cheap, so it's really loud when you lift it.
Sure.
And everybody was asleep. It was about the magic hours. We always say kind of the magic hour is between midnight and 5 a.m. And I think this
Right.
was about 2:30, and it kind of freaked my brother out because he was actually we put a pop up like a gazebo, uh, and we put the entrance of our tent just on the edge of that gazebo, and then we wrapped tarps around it. So when you get out of your tent in the morning, we have our stove in there. You don't have a bunch of dew and frost and everything, and so we can actually heat that area up, and you're have some space, and you're not all wet and outside and everything. So he was laying in that gazebo, and he didn't have his firearm or anything. And then when the tent lifted up, he thought it was my dad. And then when he didn't see the
Huh.
headlamp, everybody's running around with lamps on their head to see what you're doing because it's pitch black. And when he realized, wait a minute,
Right.
there's no light. There's something wrong. And then he had a little mag light, and it was just he had it on a blinking, and he hit it, and the tarp went down. So we jumped out, and what's interesting is that the other brother behind us in a large tent, he had his head to the ground, his ear to the ground. He couldn't sleep on a pillow, so he just took the pillow out. He said that he was kind of in a half daze wake, kind of that state where you're half awake, half asleep, and
Right.
he heard us unzipping, and then he heard right by the side of the tent, boom, 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 and he heard something like
Wow.
get just that kind of like down. And I wonder in your encounter if that's maybe not what happened on the dark side of the tent on his side, because we were shining it everywhere. And I wonder
Yeah.
if that's an instinct just to go belly down behind something. It's just curious. It just makes me I lose I think all night on stuff like this, and just what are the
Right.
instincts and tendencies. And I think they'll do whatever they need to hide, to protect, and I think they observe us because we're like entertainment. I think we're
No, I totally agree with that statement. And I think if we just let go of the ideas we have how to find them, that's when we have experiences. You look at everybody that's had an experience, they weren't expecting it.
right.
They weren't out searching for it. I mean, there are some that have, but most of them, I was right there and it happened. Like, I'm so excited to meet this guy in a couple weeks that he said, it just happened. My son and I were on the ridge and we were hunting. It happened. I pulled out my phone. I took pictures. It's not an animal I know of.
That would be really cool. That would be really cool to see. I really think that
Yeah, and I haven't seen it yet, so I will reach out to you when I actually meet with this guy and let you know what I know, because
that would
I'm
be.
sure you would be interested in
Oh,
that.
I'm very interested. I'm always interested. I tell you what we're looking for, and it's. I told some of the team guys, I said, in this day and age with this high def pictures and videos, how come we can never get a clear picture? No one can ever get a clear picture. And I said, number one, the moments where you could get a clear picture, people are so in awe, like you said, you're not expecting it. So it's not like we're all photojournalists where we automatically and instinctively reach for our phone.
Right.
We look at it, we go,
Exactly.
and you're just trying to process what am I looking at, and then boom, it's gone. And then you think, oh, I should have got a picture, and of course it's late. It's
Right.
done. I've talked to many people that say that just, oh, if I'd have had my camera. Well, we're not trained to do that. Everybody's got a video and everybody's got all these things that they can do on their phone nowadays, but no one instinctively reaches for that. And it's just got to be one of those right times. But we're trying to look at getting clear images. So when you look at it, you go, whoa, whoa, this is
Yeah.
the real deal. Now,
Well, that's why I tell people it's only a matter of time, because we're getting more and more adept to the phone in the pocket and pull it out and take a picture. We're getting better at that.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has a camera on them typically. And when I go to my cabin, there's no service. I mean, none. So I leave my phone in the truck and I go about my day. But lately I'm like, nah, I'm just going to put it in my pocket. And my girlfriend's like, why? You don't get anything out here. I'm like, what if I want to take a picture?
Right.
So I think we're becoming more and more aware. So it gets me excited to think, there's going to be something soon. We're going to capture something soon.
I've got a question for you. Have one creature that we're very, very intrigued and what we've been trying to capture footage on more than anything is this creature that they call the Dog Man. Have you heard about that, or have heard anyone out your way talking about that?
Not a lot. I mean, when you say that, I have heard that, but I have not delved into it or know what it's about or anything like that.
Well, it's kind of a misnomer because it sounds dog man, like half dog, half man, and it's nothing like anything like that. But it's just kind of a general catch-all term they're using to describe what is and a team member of ours actually was witness to one back in 2013. Basically, what it is there may be some variation in the way its characteristics or morphology, the way it looks, but in general, it is a giant wolf-like creature that is comfortable on walking on two legs as it is on all fours. And
Skinwalker Ranch, right there.
Yep.
Exactly.
So
that's exactly how they explain it. Exactly.
And so we've had the closest encounter. There's been a lab technician that had an encounter 2 miles from my house where I live right now on a highway. And he's seen it twice within the same year. Same side of the road, a mile from the first sighting that he had. But a team member of ours, his name is Wiley Dave. He's a professional coyote caller. Farmers would call him to go take out the coyotes, and he actually makes his own calls. And he measures the megahertz and everything. Well, he created a call that has two frequencies in there. It's a higher but lower pitch, so it sounds like, besides a rabbit in distress where you're calling a predator in, this one is a larger sound, so it's like a big fawn deer, a larger animal in distress. He tried it out. He was by himself in 2013, and he was out in western Oklahoma, out in the Panhandle. And he went back to a particular area where he's got large coyotes. Well, this is an evening area, so it was about 4:30 in the winter. So it starts getting a little bit dark, but there's plenty of light to shoot. So he's out there, and he uses this call, and he just went through about a 30-second series, and about 1,000 yards out, he sees a black dot, and it's coming in. I mean, just hell-bent for Georgia coming in. Boom, boom. It's running. He's like, I'll be darned. This is the first time I've ever called in a bear. Because we have black bears in Oklahoma, but not in western Oklahoma. And it's just really running in, and then it gets about 400 yards out, and then it stands up. And he's looking at this going, what is this? So he scopes it, and he's got a military-grade scope. It's got a mil-dot reticle, so you can see, no matter what the distance, you can see width and you can see height. You just dope it in to where your reticles are, and it'll tell you. And so he looked through it, and he goes, it can't be. He looked down at the ground. He looked back at a scope, tried to re-dope it in there. He looked again. It was 7.5 feet in height, standing, and its legs were still bent. It has like dog hocks. So it has the reverse knee, just like a canine. And it, at the shoulder, was about 4 feet wide. At the shoulder. It was black. It had yellow or amber eyes. And he bumped it up from 10 to 24 power, and so it looks like you're standing 2 feet in front of it. He said, I could see the saliva coming off the gums because I was ringing the dinner bell. I could see the ears twitching to find the sound, to find that dinner bell I was ringing. He said, I could see a scar on it. I could see its hands. It looked like I shouldn't say hands, it's paw-like hands. It had, its front paws looked like an exaggeratedly large raccoon hand, where it had digits, but it had a claw, a
Mm-hmm.
long claw, and its thighs looked like just bodybuilders, and it had a huge bushy tail, huge round, larger than a pie plate in diameter. And he said it was looking around for me, and he goes, now the wind was blowing its direction, and it must have caught wind, and it just took out like someone had stuck it with a hot poker, but instead of running away
Wow.
on four legs, it ran away on two.
On two.
And it went over two 5-strand barbed wire fence like it wasn't even there.
Right?
You know how
Oh my gosh. Google Skinwalker Ranch, Roosevelt. It will say everything you just said.
Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker Ranch,
Okay.
Roosevelt, Utah.
Roosevelt, Utah.
There's 2 documentaries on it that I know of.
Okay.
One is recent. The other one was about 5 years ago. The 5 years ago is hard to find because again, it was shut down.
Well, it's
I'll try to find it and see if I can send you the link.
that would be awesome.
Because once you throw something on the internet, good luck ever getting rid of it.
Yeah, right. Well, it was very interesting that my brother and I actually had this conversation just hours before we were talking this evening.
Right.
And it's very interesting how when that government, I don't know how many thousands of acres, is it like 300 plus thousand they bought? Something like that?
Something like that.
It's very interesting how there is a perimeter fence with barbed wire that I understand. I've never seen it, but I've just heard with like 360-degree infrared cameras all over this place. I mean, you just, and they have these no trespassing, no do not trespass beyond this point signs all over the place. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have.
I wonder, I mean, what is I always kind of perk up when I see a government sign, and I always look at which way those strands of barbed wire, are they facing out or are they facing in? Are they trying to keep something from coming out or something from coming from the outside in? I always pay attention to that because I always kind of perk up when I see it on the inside, facing inward.
Exactly.
That's very, very intriguing. Very intriguing. Well, definitely, we're on spot together when it comes to some of our thoughts and experiences there. We're always looking for. We have a gentleman who built some very special cameras for us. They have an infrared, but they have a germanium lens where it's light gathering, so it's thermal, and we use these and we can record. It has a DVR on it. And so we take these out and we don't flip on the infrared, but we're using that thermal to see. And we don't have anything yet, but hopefully we can. We always want to put distance between us and that timber line. We don't go just in the thick woods and you call that'd be crazy.
Exactly. Right.
But wow, that was very interesting experiences there. Then very interesting. And I will look up the Skinwalker Ranch here. So, well, so in kind of wrapping things up here a little bit, Trent, is what do you have any parting words or words for someone that may be a doubter or someone that's had an experience? So what would be do you have any parting words or anything you would say to the person that's seen?
Yeah, the thing that I would say is, because I gave Discovery on my 21 day. I've done it twice. I'm going to be doing it again because they just called. But my first time, it was all about the Bigfoot. And my episode is called Fear the Unknown. And they actually try to push it to where I think there's a Bigfoot in Belize. There was no Bigfoot in Belize. It's the largest jaguar preserve in the world. So it wasn't a Bigfoot. But when that aired, I had so many people. I mean, social media is awesome and ridiculous. I had so many, because they just put little tiny excerpts of what I experienced. So the public is like, dude, your uncle molested you. Dude, you're nuts.
Oh my
It
gosh.
doesn't matter what people think. And that's why whenever I tell my story, I'm like, I'm not telling you to believe me. I'm just telling you to listen to the story. Take what out of it you want. And I have talked to so many people that are like, I don't want to go forward with this because I don't want people to harass me. I'm like, why do you care what people think? It doesn't matter what they think. Tell your story. It's fine. Just know that you know what you know, and let them think what they think. It doesn't matter. I've had so many people on my Facebook, on my Instagram, on so many sites go, dude, you're an idiot. And I'm like, if I could tell anybody out there that's having experience, come forward with it. It doesn't matter what they think.
That's right.
Who cares?
That's right.
It's fine. You know what you had, and it doesn't matter what they think. They can think what they want. That's fine. So come forward. Oh my gosh. Just share your story, because the people that have had experiences that know that there's something out there that they don't understand are going to take you seriously.
Yeah.
No one else matters.
That's right. I totally concur with that. It's that I tell people we're not, and I had this conversation with my dad. He was trying to get in a debate with me, and I said, Dad, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Our show is not trying to convince anybody of anything.
Right?
We're trying to talk to mainly the people that's had experiences that they can't explain, or that they absolutely know what they saw. They saw what they saw, and you can't take that away. They're looking for some answers. They're looking for, why did I see it? What was it that I saw? Why did it do this when I saw it? And, there's a lot of questions we all have. No one, I'm going to say, is the expert unless you're living with them daily. And if you are, you're probably not going to possibly tell anybody. You're probably in this conservation mode. So there's a lot of people, I just say, and it's good. I always say it's good medicine to share, because
Exactly. I agree.
when you share, you just feel like, oh man, I got a weight lifted off. This was, wow, I feel so much better.
Exactly. And that was the beauty of where I grew up, because so many people in the daylight physically witnessed a Bigfoot. And when you have that many people that have that much conviction and so many stories, it's an amazing experience to just be together and go, what is it? Let's talk about it. They're not people that are skeptics. They're like, we saw this, we had this, we experienced this. It wasn't at night. It wasn't fuzzy. It wasn't confusing. It was in the middle of the day, and I saw it. It's amazing.
Yeah,
and we know each other.
Yeah, I envy you. That's really cool. That's to have a lot of people where you can. I mean, the community like that helps heal each other, and it's good for the soul to
Right.
share. And I always tell people, I said, there's two parts to every encounter. The first part is that if the person you're talking to has not had an encounter, or they believe that these creatures really don't, they're like a farce, it's going to be really hard to get past part two, which was what happened. What is the context of what happened? Were you driving and you saw it? Were you dumping garbage out in the alley and you saw it? Because if you can't get past part one, then you're going to see the eyes rolling on part two. And that really sometimes frustrates the person that's seriously trying to unload a mental load upstairs, and they can't do it because people are. So this is why these shows work so well as therapy for people, because they don't have the awesome town like you grew up in. They're surrounded by
Right.
people. They're like, there's Joey and his Bigfoot story. Hey Joey, tell us that story. And now he's a joke, and he's mad. That's really cool that people, help share, which helps heal. and it just says that we're all human, and you saw something, and like you said, sharing is good medicine, and it's good for the soul, and that's why we get excited when someone has seen something, had something, even if it's years ago. It's still good for sharing. It's good for the soul because we can all learn. No one's really an expert. So I learn
Right.
every time we do an interview. Like, wow, I didn't know they could do that.
Exactly. And we live in such a society where I need to be validated with what I say. Look at the social media. How many likes did I get? It doesn't matter. If you experience something, share it. It doesn't matter what the skeptics think. It matters what you think,
That's
what
it.
you saw. That's this guy that said, I want to meet with you in a couple of weeks, and I have pictures of him. He says, I went silent for years because I couldn't stand what people said. I'm like, wow, you're a weak person. Not to be rude, but why do you care what someone you don't know thinks?
Well, Trent, not everybody's built that way, and you know that. I mean, it's we talk. My brothers and I talk about this all the
Right.
time. You've got to just toot to your own horn. And the majority, unfortunately, the majority of people, if I was going to say a percentage, I'll just throw out 80%, worry about what your neighbor thinks of you. And
Oh my
there's,
gosh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad I'm not that person.
me too. We've never been that way. It's not in my DNA. I don't
Right.
care. And the reason why, it doesn't mean I don't like people. I really love people. But if you want to do something different and be who you are to become in life, you cannot worry what your neighbor thinks, especially if you're going into business. You cannot worry what someone else thinks about you. You just have to do it.
Exactly, and that's the perfect example of when I went on Naked and Afraid, and I did my beliefs, and they gave little bits and excerpts, and I got so many messages of that's fake, you're an idiot, your uncle molested you, it was blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you can think what you want.
That's right.
I'm just sharing my story. I just share my experience. I don't know what my experience meant. I don't know the logistics of it. All I know is what happened, and I'm sharing that. And you can take it and do whatever you want with it.
There you go.
I just know what happened.
Well, thanks, Trent. I'll let you go, buddy. I know it's late, and I appreciate your time so much. And we'll keep contact. I'll get some things sent to you. And just thanks a million again for doing the interview. I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, awesome. Thank you for. I always love sharing it, especially to a format that understands that there's things out there.
Oh, yeah, there are.
Love that.
And I'll go ahead and when the show's ready and everything, I'll give you a courtesy and I'll say, hey, here's the link.
Awesome. I would appreciate that. Would love to watch it.
Okay, Trent. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate your time and have a great evening. We'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks, Lance. Appreciate it.
You bet. Bye bye.
All right. Bye-bye.